Hey there! Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Genshin Impact character review series. Today's character is Arataki Itto. He is a Geo Claymore character from Inazuma, and as a first opinion, he's pretty cool, I must say. Itto is a very cool character with some very nice concepts, although he does kind of end up as a 5-star version of a 4-star character, which we will, mention that. So, why don't we get into his kit and see what he's all about? So, starting off with Itto's attacks, we immediately run into a very interesting concept. Itto has pretty normal Claymore attacks, slow but heavy attacks. They don't deal much damage, he's not a physical carry. So, yeah, and he also has a pretty short combination of attacks, like 4 to 5 hits, which is the standard for most Claymore users. But Itto has a special thing with his normal and charge attacks. He can't exactly charge attack like other Claymore users. He doesn't have the spinny thing like 4-star characters have, nor does he have the multiple slashes thing like someone like Diluc or Eula or like Beidou has. He gains stacks of superlative super strength, which fits Itto. This name fits Itto's character very much. So he gains these stacks every time he hits an opponent with his second and fourth normal attack. Whenever Itto has one of these stacks, instead of doing a 1/charge attack, which he does when he has no stacks, he'll do these sort of uppercut attacks with his Claymore very fast, and he will also not consume any sort of stamina. And whenever these stacks end, he will also slam the ground. And even with one stack, you can do one uppercut slice and then slam down and deal some very good damage. Itto can get superlative super strength through other means. Those are tied to his skills and burst. So I'll mention that. We'll mention that when we get there. But yes, the charge attacks are pretty much Itto's main thing. He has a talent tied to these attacks, where whenever you use one of these stacks and you do one of these uppercut charge attacks, Itto's attack speed increases, which is a very rare stat to see in Genshin, although some leaks are saying that we might be seeing more of that. But nevertheless, yes, it is a rare stat to see on Genshin characters, and it's really fun actually how if you get lots of stacks, which the maximum is around 4, but you can get stacks while losing stacks, like Itto just goes nuts with how fast he attacks with his charge attacks. But yeah, it's a pretty unique concept. It finally brings a new charge attack animation and thing into Claymore characters because polearms have had special charge attack animations for like 5 stars since the beginning. And, Swords had Jun at first, then Ayaka also has a special charge attack animation. Catalysts have their own thing, right? Bows are bows. But Claymores were stuck with either the spinning or the multiple slashes, and Itto is a nice, breath of fresh air. So, yeah, the stacks at first were kind of hard to see, I must say. But as you start playing with Itto, you will start to notice how many stacks you have more easily. And when you reach max stacks, you'll see the Oni face mask glow behind Itto, or even like I've seen it like stick around on other characters. That was a lot of fun. But yes, it will like shine, and you will easily see that. Okay, I've reached max stacks. It's time to start charge attacking. So yeah, very cool concept with the charge attacks, and let's move on to his skill. So, Itto's skill, he summons a bull. It has a name, but I just call it the bull. He deals a good amount of geo damage when he sends out the bull, and this bull acts as a taunt. It inherits HP from Itto, and also grants you stacks of superlative super strength, depending on some things. It will give you 1 stack when it hits an enemy, when it damages things. It will grant you another stack if it gets hit by enemy attacks. And also it will grant you 1 stack when it dies, either by being destroyed or the duration ran out. So the bull is actually a very, very good way of getting the superlative super strength stacks. Even while off field, you will get these stacks. So yeah, and the good thing is, if you throw the bull and an enemy has some sort of AoE attack that stays, like the treasure hoarders with their bottles, if that lands on the bull, which it most likely will if they are taunted, you will get stacks periodically, and your chains of charge attacks can go for so long. It is nuts, and it's very, very good. That's about it. It's a pretty, like, it's a taunt, deals damage, and, you know, the main thing is giving you those strength, super strength stacks. But yeah, and it deals a very, very good amount of damage. The taunt radius is fine, like every other taunt that is in Genshin. So yeah. And in terms of, like, particle generation, it's fine, actually. In my team, we'll talk about team compositions, but in my team, where I have Zhongli in the team alongside Itto, he acts as a pretty good battery for Zhongli, throwing out the bull every now and then. So yeah, and in terms of battering Itto himself, well, moving on to Itto's burst, it's fine. So what does Itto's burst do? So Itto does a beautiful burst animation, I have to say, and he gets this giant freaking club. It converts all of Itto's attacks to geo damage, which cannot be overridden. And it also turns Itto's def into attack. So just like Hu Tao, who converts HP to attack numbers, this is important, Itto as well turns his def into attack and gains a lot of attack, and then, you know, he has geo damage. This burst is okay to battery with Itto himself, but his team compositions, especially if Itto, who is meant to be played as the main DPS of a team, you know, if he is the main thing of your team, you need to battery this burst quite well. It has around like 60 to 80 cost, which is the standard for Inazuma characters, but yeah, in a Geo team, which is his main composition, it's fine. And in my Hu Tao team, where I just have him for the Geo Resonance, he actually kind of sits fine. I actually have his ult plenty of times, but I mean, Xingqiu makes a lot of particles, so that at least kind of batteries Itto. But yeah, the skill batteries the burst fine, and also the burst makes it so that your first and third attacks also grant you superlative super strength, which makes it so that with your burst active, all of your attacks give you superlative super strength stacks, which is pretty good. And also because of the conversion of def to attack, you most likely want to use the bull after casting your burst, because that will maximize its damage. And trust me, this thing can deal a lot of damage. It has insane scaling, but casting the bull after the burst will also give you 1 stack if you deal damage, and then with a few attacks, you'll easily gain 3 or 4 stacks, and then just start charge attacking. You know, the enemies will attack the bull will take damage, then you gain stacks as you lose stacks, and that's the basic cycle of using Itto. And also, the duration of the burst is pretty good. I found out that you can use at least 2 bulls while your burst is active, so using your burst, immediately throwing out the bull, starting the charge attacks, and then throwing out another bull, that's when your burst will end, and that's how you can keep track of your burst duration, looking at the bull's cooldown, knowing that 1 or 2 seconds after you used your second bull, it will run out. And that's a pretty big DPS time, and most of the buffs that Itto gets from his supports do, last that long. So, yeah. The burst is fine. It is indeed kind of a Noelle copycat, and that's where the whole 5-star version of a 4-star comes in. The def conversion to damage attack is basically the same, as Noelle. But Itto is kind of different, where his attack, where things don't deal damage based on his def, he makes def into attack. That's why I mentioned Hu Tao. And this plays a big role, because you can actually get supports like Bennett and help Itto. Because if Bennett gives you a pretty good attack buff, well, it will buff Itto's damage. It might not be the best, team for Itto to have Bennett on his team, but it still won't hurt Itto that much. So, I mean, going on to team formations and what teams Itto fits in, well, there's only one real team that can fully take benefit of Itto, and that's the 4 Geo team. Full Geo. That is Zhongli, Itto, Goro, and Albedo. These four are the main are the main pieces of the full Geo team. Goro is tailor-made for Itto. He provides insane def increases to Itto, which makes Itto just deal insane amounts of damage. Like, I've seen a partially built Goro with a pretty well-built Itto just throw bulls that deal 100k damage. That is insane. And Goro also gives you geo damage bonuses. So yeah, he was tailor-made again for Itto. And yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna do a Goro review, so I guess I should. I can like shove a Goro review here. I mean, I don't like how he's so tailor-made for Itto. I think it's kind of like bad game design, to be honest, to have a character that is basically only useful for Itto. I mean, in this team, you also have Albedo, who has def scaling as well, so that does help, with making Goro a bit more useful. But yeah, it's I don't like it personally, but hey, if you cannot buff Itto else, what else can you give him? He needs def buffs and geo damage buffs, and Goro does exactly that. So, if Goro didn't exist, he would end up as a Xiao, because Xiao doesn't have a support that will help boost his damage, so maybe we'll see Xiao support, but Goro is that thing. It's that support to Xiao. He supports Itto. Yeah, if you are going to use the full Geo team, then Goro will use the Husk, the Husk artifacts. That's really his only thing that he can use. And then, unless you want to give him some Emblem of Severed Fate for some energy recharge, but most people also run him with the Favonius Warbow, because Goro just needs to have his bow, he needs to have his ultimate always, so the energy generation that, the Favonius weapons give you are pretty good for Goro himself, and also for battering Itto if you so need it, to use the Favonius particles for Itto. And Goro himself also generates a fine enough amount of particles, which will, alongside Itto, just basically battery the whole Geo team. And yeah, I mean, other members of the Geo team, Zhongli is Zhongli. He is the only character that can offer you Geo Shred, because because Viridescent cannot, nor can Kazuha give you Geo damage bonus through his abilities. So Zhongli is pretty much needed, and of course he has his shield, and with all the Geo damage that you'll get from Goro, his meteors can do a very good damage. So, Zhongli is Zhongli. And then Albedo is the sub DPS, because Itto has, as we said, a very good duration on his burst. He's going to be on the field for a long time, and in that time, I mean, Itto will output a very good amount of DPS, but having some sort of sub DPS of the field is also a good idea. It is a bump up in DPS, and Albedo is really the only one that fits very, very well. His flowers and his ultimate all just, they have def scaling, so Goro helps their geo damage, and again, they are off-field sub DPS. He also can be a fine enough battery for the whole Geo team, although his particle generation is kind of unreliable. So yeah, and that's the Geo team. You can see though that to have this full Geo team, you need 3 5-stars. It is a very expensive Geo team, and Itto indeed is kind of that expensive character to build because of these requirements. You can make this kind of cheaper. Zhongli, I would say, is kind of necessary as well. The Geo Shred is very much needed, but Goro, of course, is the must. The absolute must if you want Itto to be your main DPS. Else, you can grab yourself the Geo Traveler to replace Albedo or Zhongli. Find enough sub DPS just throwing down the rocks, and the crit rate that they give you through their ultimate is pretty much fine. Very welcome crit rate buffs. And then the other real Geo character you can use is Ningyan. Not Yunjin, because Itto doesn't really use normal attacks, he's more charge attack based. But Ningyan is pretty much fine. Her walls can generate a good amount of particles. She might not benefit much from the def that Goro will give you compared to Albedo, but the geo damage is still there, and, well, Ningyan with her walls and her ultimate does a lot of damage. So yeah, those are the only two substitutes to kind of make the team kind of cheaper if you don't have Albedo or Zhongli. But other than that, there's not really much. As I said, Bennett can also be there. You know, you can go something like Albedo, Goro Itto, or Ningyan Goro Itto, and also put in a Bennett, because as you have also may have also noticed, the full Geo team has no healers. Zhongli doesn't heal until he's C6. Itto doesn't have any inbuilt heals. Albedo also doesn't heal. And Goro doesn't heal until he's C4. So the easiest one is to get Goro to C4 to get yourself some healing. But before that, you're going to need to be careful. And also, if you don't have Zhongli, it's going to be hard to not bring a healer like Bennett in the team, in this full Geo team, if Goro isn't C4, because you are going to struggle against anything if you just take damage, right? So, and because of Itto's high TPS time, high field time, you're going to need some good off-field heals. And that's about it for team formations. I again use Itto as a kind of sub-DPS on my Hu team, just for the Geo Resonance. I mean, he does his job. He throws the bulls. He sometimes, uses his ultimate. I mean, he does fine. He does fine. I know I should have and could have rolled for Albedo. I just wanted this shiny new Arataki Itto, and I also wanted a new Claymore character. I like Itto's gameplay. So, for artifacts, the only thing that Itto really gets and can use is the Husk artifacts, and that's really it. Gives you def, gives you geo damage, and that's about it. If you can't get yourself a 4-piece Husk set, then 2-piece Archaic and a 2-piece Husk for the geo damage and the defense stats is pretty much fine until you get the 4-piece Husk, and it is needed. And then I guess we go on to weapons. So, there aren't that many weapons that Itto can use, unfortunately. Because of his def requirements, it is hard to pick up a weapon. For 3 stars, I mean, there is the White Iron Greatsword that gives you def. If for some reason you can't have anything else, you don't have anything else, I mean, that's the only thing that you can really use, because, again, it gives you def. So, for 4 stars. The Black Cliff Slasher. I wouldn't recommend it. It is indeed useful to balance out your crit rate and crit damage, although Itto does have a crit rate ascension stat, so balancing a crit rate and crit damage is easier. But if you so desperately don't have anything else, and you already have the Slasher, I would not waste my Star Glitter to get the Slasher for Itto. If you already have one, then it's fine for balancing out crit rate and crit damage. The attack buffs aren't all that useful, and it might be a bit hard to get, because seriously, Albedo in the full Geo team can output a massive amount of sub DPS. He might steal your kills, and because of that, you might not get the Black Cliff stacks. It's fine again if you already have a Black Cliff, but do not go for a Black Cliff if you want to use it on Itto. The Favonius Greatsword, I don't recommend it. Itto doesn't need all the energy recharge that it gives you. It ends up useless. Lithic Blade, it's not really for Itto. The attack percent is nice. The crit rate that the effect gives you is nice as long as at the attack. Even if Itto scales off of def, giving him a bunch of attack will still give him a bunch of attack, right? But it also, it very much limits your playstyle and your team composition. Albedo isn't from Liyue. Only Zhongli is from Liyue in the full Geo team. So unless you're running Ningyan and Zhongli in your Geo team, the Lithic Blade ends up pretty useless, especially also if it's on low refinements. So not a very high recommendation, but it could work if you have nothing else. The Prototype Archaic is not really again for Itto. It will give you less attack than the Lithic Blade, and also won't give you any crit rate. The effect is fine, but again, it doesn't really suit Itto. Range Slasher gives you Elemental Mastery, which isn't useful on Itto, so that's a passive, and if its effect is kind of good. Serpent Spine is pretty good on Itto. It helps you balance out your crit and crit damage just like the Black Cliff, although, of course, Serpent Spine's effect is much, much more useful than the Black Cliff. So, it makes you gain stacks while on the field, and you deal lots more damage while, you have those stacks. You also take more damage, but because you have Zhongli on the team, Serpent Spine, you will protect Itto, and Serpent Spine's stacks won't go away. The thing with Serpent Spine, though, is that if you use it, you have to keep track of so many stack numbers. You have to keep track of superlative super strength stacks. You need to keep count of your husk artifact stacks, and then you need to keep number of Serpent Spine stacks. It'll become such a freaking effects crazy thing where he has so many stacks going around him. The blades of Serpent Spine, his Oni face on the back because of the superlative super strength, and then the numbers that Husk has. It's pretty crazy. But the thing is, though, that Serpent Spine kind of goes, it's kind of a counter, let's say, to Husk, the artifact set, because the Husk set wants you to be off the field, or it needs your elemental skill to be dealing damage. Itto's elemental skill only deals damage once. Because he's on the field, he might start losing stacks. He will get Serpent Spine stacks, but he'll lose Husk stacks. It is a mix, because in the end of your DPS rotation, you might have max Serpent Spine stacks, but you might have no Husk stacks. So it's still, though, a very, very good weapon. I use Serpent Spine. It's not free-to-play friendly for sure, but it is a very, very much good weapon for Itto. Plenty of people, if you've bought the Battle Pass, you might have a high refinement Serpent Spine. And I would suggest using that over the next weapon, which is the max weapon, is the White Blind. The Claymore you can craft with the billets, just like the Prototype Archaic, because the White Blind gives you Def, and also normal and charge attacks increase your attack and Def up to 4 stacks. And, this is the very, very good weapon for Itto. Tons of Def, a nice amount of attack through the stacks, and it is craftable, so it is free-to-play friendly, but it does need the billets. And if you don't have any billets because you're unlucky, or you use them to craft a Prototype Archaic, or maybe a Snow-Tombed Star Silver, well, you're kind of screwed. So I recommend White Blind. I don't know how much I would recommend it over Serpent Spine. They are kind of, at each other. Serpent Spine will help you a lot with crit rate and crit damage, and its effect is very, very useful, while White Blind is more suited for Itto because of all the def it will give you. So, and because Itto again has a crit rate ascension stat, it might, you might not have such a difficulty balancing out crit rate and crit damage, but I must say Serpent Spine looks cooler than the White Blind, so pick what you want. If you have, Claymore billets, and you're not gonna use them to craft Prototype Archaics, and you got yourself a White Blind, you can get yourself White Blinds, then sure, go for the White Blind. Compared to an R1 Serpent Spine, the White Blind for sure at R5 will rank higher in damage than the Serpent Spine, but if you already have like an R2, R3 Serpent Spine, the difference might not be that much. So again, it's a give or take situation. You might really want the crit rate from Serpent Spine. They're fighting each other, these two weapons, so pick what you want. White Blind might net you more damage, Serpent Spine might net you more damage. Again, let's leave it at that. Serpent Spine versus White Blind it's a very 50-50. The Sacrificial Greatsword is not really that much needed. You don't need two bulls, and two bulls cannot exist with each other, so yeah. The Snow-Tombed Star Silver gives you physical damage, so that also, Itto can't use that. The Katsuragi Kiri Nagamasa, which is the Inazuma craftable claymore, also isn't for Itto because it gives you energy recharge, and then it's about energy generation, so not that much. The Luxurious Sea Lord, the fish one, while it has a lot of attack, its effect with the elemental burst isn't all that good because Itto's burst doesn't matter. Itto's burst doesn't deal damage. It's his charge attack, so the Luxurious Sea Lord unfortunately ends up useless, and so does the Akuomaru, which is the Inazuma Gacha Claymore. It also ends up useless because it gives you elemental burst damage, and Itto can't really use that. So then we move on to the 5 stars. Skyward Pride, not so much for Itto. Like, the energy recharge again isn't all that useful for Itto. I mean, the old damage increase on the passive is kind of fine, and then the vacuum blades though aren't all that crazy, although because you're going to convert your def to attack, these vacuum blades could deal a good amount of damage, although they are physical damage and they are buffed by physical attack buffs, but like Skyward Pride over a White Blind R5, not at all. R1 White Blind, I could see an argument. And if you have a like R2, R3 Skyward Pride, again, I could see the argument over an R1 White Blind. But against like Serpent Spine or again a High Refinement White Blind, not at all. I don't think so. Wolf's Greystone, it's not all that bad for Itto. It gives you so much attack that it becomes very, very useful, and it also will give attack to your teammates. So Zhongli will deal more damage with his burst, and also Albedo will deal more damage through his burst, even if you have him fully built on def. So Wolf's Gravestone, especially at high refinements, but even an R1, I could see an argument over the White Blind or the Serpent Spine. It also looks cool as fuck. But it's not super ideal for Itto. The Unforged is also kind of a mixed bag. Tons and tons and tons of attack, right? And it also increases shield strength on Itto. Zhongli's shield becomes even more powerful. And again, it's all about being protected by a shield to have more attack. It's kind of like Wolf's Gravestone. A lot and a lot of attack. But I think it ends up worse than Wolf's Gravestone. While the Unforged might give you, like, let's say 5 or 6% more damage to Itto, Wolf's Gravestone will give you like 40% more attack to your teammates. So that could easily mean like a 20% increase in all of your team's damage. So either get a 5% increase on Itto's damage or an overall 20% on your team's damage. And that matters a lot, of course, and that's why I would say that Wolf's Gravestone is kind of better than the Unforged, and also Wolf's Gravestone is easier to get, of course. Song of Broken Pines isn't for Itto because it's for Eula, it gives physical damage, it's not for Itto. And then comes the Red Horn Stone Thresher. It is Itto's best in slot weapon because it's the 5-star Claymore tailor-made for him. It looks fucking awesome on Itto. It gives a fuck ton of crit damage, even if it has low base attack, but that doesn't matter because Itto uses Def. And then, of course, it has the Def increase passive, the normal and charge attack damage increased by Def. It's basically Staff of Homa, but for Itto, because of Def. It is tailor-made for Itto. I can't really exactly say anything else. So, yeah. Again, there aren't all that many choices for Itto, but the choices that you can get are pretty, easy to come by. Again, the White Blind is very free-to-play friendly because you can craft it. And for other weapons, $10 for that battle pass for the Serpent Spine. Else, you're going to have to, give your luck out for a Red Horn rerun, or maybe use a high refinement Wolf's Gravestone, really. So, that's it for Itto. Overall, I actually really like his mechanics with his charge attacks, and yeah, he ends up being a very fun character, and I like him. Personality-wise, I mean, he's awesome. His voice actor in Japanese is the singer of TM Revolution, and I mean, he does a pretty good job. I like it. So that is it for me. Next up, I mean, it's interesting. I think next up might be either Kazuha or Kamisato Ayato when he comes out. So that's gonna be a long while, but I'll see you then.